this short video I'm going to show you some of the features that allow you to create a cash flow for construction projects using Asta Powerproject. Obviously there's many ways that money can be spent and earned, and this is dictated by the client and or the form of contract. And whilst not satisfying every scenario in detail, this video will give an insight into how costs, income and resources can be added to our projects in a variety of different ways to create a cash flow program. During the presentation we're going to be looking at a construction program which is broken into three sections: the procurement section, construction and prelims, and this is going to allow me to demonstrate different ways of adding costs and resources. So I'm going to start off in the procurement section. An Asta Powerproject allows us to have multiple activities per line, each of which can overlap here, and this feature is perfectly suited to the creation of procurement strings where many activities can happen for the same event. For example, for each item we may have out to tender, drawings, order, manufacture, etc., and these activities link through to the main part of the program. So in the procurement program we're going to demonstrate two very basic ways to add resources and costs. Asta Powerproject allows us to allocate labour, plant and materials. Labour and plant are created as permanent resources, and this is the hierarchical structure of resources that we have for our project. So within labour we are split into a variety of different skills. Bricklayers, carpenters you see is broken down further, and there are labour. And then with our plant we have a variety of plant that we're using. We're going to look at each of these in more depth later on, but we're going to concentrate on this resource here called surveyors. And what we're going to do is we're going to allocate surveyors to the out to tender activity for each procurement line. So I'm just going to open this up, and we have three histograms as well at the bottom here. So the allocation of the number of surveyors, a S-curve if you like of total project costs, and a cost to date by week of our project costs as well. So first of all we'll look at our surveyor resource, and you can see here that they're costing us £25 per hour, and we can allocate in Asta a number of different, you can configure the any one that you want, any rate that you want of cost and income for a resource. So the more that a resource works or is used, the more that it will cost us. Here we have a £25 an hour rate set by default. Now also at this stage I'll point out to you that Powerproject allows a hierarchical structure of cost centres, both income and expenditure, and the spend of these resources gets allocated to a bucket of cost centre. In this instance here, this will be the staff cost centre that the surveyor's cost will be going into, and these obviously aggregate up so we can review the costs at the total cost level, project costs, and this is what we're showing in the histogram over here. So let's look at allocating surveyors, and the easiest way to allocate these is just to type in a number of surveyors that's going to work on the out to tender activity. So we're just going to type 1 in there, and you can see immediately I type 1 in, we get 1 appearing on our histogram of surveyors required. Our S-curve of cost goes up to £2,000, and our weekly cost graph appears as well. And the really good thing about Powerproject and histograms is as I move activities around all on the same screen, I have my resources and costs. So I'm able to work in one screen dynamically with costs and resources and time all at the same go. And I can add obviously one onto here as well. Or the other way I can allocate resources is by selecting the tasks that I wish to allocate to, multi-selecting in this case, and I can drag my resource from the left hand side and drop it onto one of the tasks, and that allocates it onto all of the tasks that I had selected. And I could do a global change by doing a filter on all my surveyor tasks and allocating to all of those. So now I have very quickly a schedule of resources, of surveyor resources allocated to my procurement items, and I can see how much this is costing me and how many surveyors I need. So this is the simplest way of allocating resources in Asta Powerproject, and later on in the video we'll look at other methods of how we can add them to our project. So using the procurement schedule, we can also start to look at adding fixed costs. As I said before, costs in Powerproject can either be variable costs, i.e. derived from resource allocations, or fixed cost lump sum payments, such as subcontractor payments. So in this example, we're going to assume that the working drawings activity, which is the purple one here, is being done by a specialist design company, and we're paying them a lump sum for each set of drawings. So we're going to be assigning costs from the design costs center, which is down here, the design fees cost center. And as with resources, it's a simple method of dragging and dropping an allocation onto, like so, and we have a default amount of £1 here, which is the default amount, and we can edit that to the actual amount that we're paying the design company. And again, you saw the histogram alter. As I move that, the shape of the histogram changes. So we're adding a fixed cost to an activity rather than a variable resource cost. And to keep it simple here, I can just type in the value. So if I type 7,000 into Concrete Works, you can see I have my allocation now, and my histogram has increased to reflect the additional amount. And similarly on here, I can type in the amount that I'm paying in design fees, and it's starting to affect my histogram. Any of these histograms I can drill down to look at the constituent members, so you can see the design fees are probably making up all of the cost here. Note there's some internal costs as well, so I can go through and drill down from project costs and look at how those costs are derived, and that's the same for resource allocations, weekly and monthly costs as well. We're going to look at the prelim section of the program, and the way Asta Powerproject allows us to handle prelims is to create what's called Hamlet Tasks. So inside of these hammocks I have 2 tasks in this case, but this could be a number of tasks that set the span of the particular hammock. So for example, the groundwork and structural foreman I need between fencing and the roof plant room, and these are copies of the exact tasks in the construction program. So as they move, the hammock task increases or shortens in duration. So rather than us creating specific tasks for the allocation of a resource, what we can do is to create this hammock task which sets the span of when we need the item, and then simply allocate the resource or the cost directly onto the hammock task. So if we look at the foreman in this particular instance, we can see that they cost us £25 per hour. So if I was to, as we did before, allocate foreman to this particular task, you can see that the cost has increased to £44,800 in this particular instance, and you can see the allocation of the foreman costing us 22,000. And as the project may change, so if this was to be delayed, I need my foreman for longer, so it costs me £29,400. And of course what I could have done is to, at the start of the project, to have taken a baseline of my project, and in Asta Powerproject you can have as many baselines as you want to compare against as many baselines as you require. So we're just taking a snapshot of the program at this particular time. just reference our baseline. You can see that we had a planned cost of 22,000, but if we were to extend this now, we can see now the variation from our planned cost, and Asta has a full earn value and cost portfolio of data that we can report on. So similarly, we've added resources there, but we may want to look at a cost, for example. And when we allocated design fees earlier on, you may remember the costs that we allocated were purely fixed costs, but also costs can be variable dependent upon the length of time that they're allocated. So if we look at the labour cost centre down here, for example, you can see that this is time based and it costs us £4,000 per month. So rather than allocating resources, I'm just going to add a labour value to this particular activity, and you can see again the cost increased by £16,000 because we added that amount. And if the project was to increase in duration, this increases as well. So this is varying dependent on the length of the Hamlet task, because the labour cost centre costs us £4,000 per month. And let's have a look finally at plant. So if we look at the crane activity here, which goes between the ground slab and brickwork here, you can see that we already have the tower crane allocated, and we simply dragged this in from the plant section, and the tower crane must cost us some money, so it costs us £1,000 per week. So if this again were to be longer, I would expect the cost of the tower crane to increase. So you can see this value here, 17,000. The cost of the tower crane varies, whereas the baseline value stays in position. So in a construction program, the prelims it's very easy to cost those up in Powerproject using a combination of permanent resources, labour, plant and costs. Okay, we're going to move on to the construction section of the program now to demonstrate some other types of resource and cost allocations, and we're going to concentrate on fixed costs for this section. Now, before we allocated fixed costs, these were spread evenly across an activity. But let's say, for example, in the piling activity, we're going to buy some materials, but we're not going to pay for them for 30 days. So if we look at the properties of the materials cost centre, you can see that I can set that to happen at a particular time after the finish of an activity. So I can ask it to finish 30 days after an activity completes. So if I was to add the materials to this, you can see that my cost allocation actually occurs 30 days after the completion of the activity. So this could be used for retentions, for example, or when we're expecting to be paid on jobs, or when we're expecting to pay out. So when I move this activity, if this activity moves, I always retain the 30-day differential between the task and the cost allocation. And of course I could set this to happen at the start of a task, before the task starts, if you like. A variety of different ways of configuring that, but every time I add the materials on here, it's always a 30-day lag, and I'm able to change the value to whatever I want, and again the histogram alters itself. So that's an example of using fixed costs to create what Asta calls point spends. The final thing in terms of costing that we're going to look at is materials or consumable resources, as we call them in Powerproject. And you can see I have a structure here of bricks, common bricks, engineering bricks, facing bricks, special bricks, and my common bricks are costing me 12 pence each, and the money goes into the materials cost centre. So what I can simply do here to allocate bricks to activities, so I've got the superstructure program here. If I was to say here there were 10,000 bricks, that's costing me £1,200 because it's 12 pence a brick, and it moves the histogram. The cost of my material starts to move, and again, if I move my activity, the cost graph moves. And again, so I can just go through here quickly, putting in the amount of bricks that I'm using. Of course, this could be copied in from Excel if we already have, or brought in from a bill of quantities if that's already been created. But that's another way of bringing costs in. So we've looked at bringing costs in from labour, from plant, from materials, and from fixed costs, either spread across a task, time-based, or in terms of point spend. One thing we're going to look at to complete the cash flow video is getting income into our project. So Powerproject uniquely allows us to add income in, so we can compare these to our costs to work out the profitability or otherwise of our projects. And income can come in a couple of ways. We looked at resources and how they could have cost rates. Resources can also have income rates. So if we have fee earning people, maybe we're an architectural company and we're earning money by booking people out, that's one way that we can get money in. So every hour that this resource is allocated, we're going to earn £28.75. So in this instance, we'd be making £3.75 per hour. And the other way is to add fixed costs, and that's the simplest way to do it. So you can see down here we have an income cost center, so we're not looking at exporting out to Excel and changing things to minuses and messing around with things like that. All we're doing is we're adding an income allocation onto an item here. So I'm going to say the substructure, income, which we're going to say we get paid 30 days after the end of the activity. We'll say in this case the amount we're going to go for is 20,000. So you can see here that at the moment the substructure is costing us 67,561. The amount of money we're getting paid at that particular time is only 18,000. So we're actually losing money on the substructure item. And again, we have some over here. So we're starting to make money. When we get to the envelope, we're charging 127,000, but the cost is only 38. And we can see in our cash flow histogram that our maximum borrowings on this project are upwards of 280,000. But then we start to make a profit towards the end of the job. And obviously the really useful thing here is that if items move around, so does my cash flow. And this can be really critical when you're comparing how the job is going, the progress, what effect is this having on us borrowing money. So if we're late on very profitable items, it's going to have an effect on our cash flow. And that's the ultimate aim of what we were trying to achieve in this video by loading our project with costs, comparing them to what we actually did, and then loading in our income to see our cash flow. Thank you very much for listening and watching.